contribution that the small village of St Mary's made to the war effort in 1914-18 war. In 1914, St Mary's had a population of approximately 1,200 people, of which just over 120 went to the war. So you can see that's quite a contribution, 10% of the population.
That's a lot.
In some families, there were 2 or 3 sons served. Now, every family in the town would have been involved. If not directly, it would have been their neighbour or relative or a close friend who went. Many of the young service people that went were students from St Mary's School. So they're all, local boys that had gone. They served in a variety of campaigns from Egypt, Syria, France, Belgium, and some were involved in the landing at Gallipoli. Now, of the 120 odd that went, 24 of them were killed. And so, it was a very sad time for the people of St Mary's. Some who were killed were never found, and memorial plaques have been erected in war cemeteries across all the above countries that I mentioned. The families that were affected, I don't think ever really got over their loss. I know as a small child I lived with my grandparents, and both of them had lost a brother in the First World War, and they were often spoken about, and when Anzac Day came around, it was always a very sad time for them. One of those, my grandfather's brother, he went from St Mary's, and Cecil Mallard was his name, and he was only 22 when he was killed. He joined up at 21. Just 3 months after he arrived in France, he was badly wounded. He was sent to London for recuperation, then straight back to the front, and then was killed in Belgium. His body was never found, so, it was the youngest of a large family, so it was a very sad time for the family. And as I go through the family tree, we have several members of the family that came since have been named after these 2 young soldiers that were killed, and that's was the way those days, other family members came along and they were named after those that were lost in the First World War. The first ever mayor of St Mary's Council was William Garner, and he had 3 sons went, and only one of the 3 returned.
Wow.
So, that his sons were killed only 5 months apart, and Athol was killed in France and is buried there at Harbonese Cemetery, and William Jr., he was killed there, but his body was never found. So there's a memorial plaque for him. Another one, Kenneth Jackson, killed in action at Gallipoli. So, but in 1915, after the disaster of Gallipoli, so many more young people joined after that, and there were 15 soldiers in Gilgandra, or 15 young men in Gilgandra decided to join up, and they started what they called the Cooee March.
I've heard of that.
Yes, as they came through each country town, they gave the bush call of Cooee and rounded up more recruits to join them on their march to Sydney to enlist. And as they came through St Mary's, at least 2 or 3 of the young men joined up then with the Cooee March. So I think although the landing at Gallipoli was such a disaster, it sort of encouraged this this feeling of comradeship and patriotism and what have you. So many of the young fellows joined up after that. The people of St Mary's, after the war, they all contributed money towards a war memorial that was built in the form of a band rotunda in Victoria Park, and all the names of the young people from St Mary's are on that war memorial. It's quite interesting that how differently people were treated in those days, because we have a story here from the Nepean Times about when one of the soldiers was returning, and it said how the usual, the customary procession was formed at the station to welcome this young soldier home. So apparently they did it for all the returning soldiers, and the procession was headed by the band and the alderman from the council, and cadets and school children and other townspeople, and they all paraded along Queen Street into the Protestant Hall, which was on the highway where the car park for the band club is now. And apparently there was a reception held there for this returning soldier. And I think of the way the Vietnam vets were treated when they came back, you know, they could have done with a little bit of that support that the soldiers from the First World War received.
I thought of that myself. It was quite a different reception.
It was. It was, very much so. But I think too, in those days, well, St Mary's being such a small place, everyone knew each other and cared about each other, and so everyone was more or less like family, you know. So I think because everyone knew each other, the concern was there. They didn't just worry about their own son or brother that had gone, but about everyone from this town.
So one person's loss was everyone's loss?
It was very much so. But, you know, this Kenneth Jackson, who was killed at Gallipoli, his brother was also at the landing of Gallipoli, Eric Jackson, and he was awarded a DSM for gallantry. So, on one hand, the parents would have been celebrating this award for one son, at the same time losing their younger son, you know, so it was very difficult times. Another young chap, Arthur Steele, he'd been an assistant at the post office when he enlisted, and he was killed in action in France, but because of his experience at the post office with the Morse code, he was enlisted into the signallers, so he was able to use his skill there. With some of the people, you know, most were killed in action, but some died of malaria. Others, another young chap, Harry Adams, he died of meningitis that he contracted in the army camps. So, yes, they were very, very much difficult times. Quite a few of the well-known names that went, you know, they're families that we remember because there are streets named after the families, and that, you know, we've got Chesham's. We've got a Chesham Street up by the railway, Desborough's, the Dollins, two brothers went, they were a very well-known family in the town. Beecrofts and Bennetts from the Bennett wagons, they had two sons went, one came back, one didn't. And Gibsons and Giles, Hackett's, of course, you know, they were a big family in the town. Gersbachs were another very well-known family, had two of their family went. and the Lethbridge Tincombe, they went. Lethbridge's with a family from up on the hill with the big homestead there that's now the chancellery for the university. So, because there was a Luke and Hopes, though, and other families that, contributed much to this town, and of course the Andrews. So they're all, well, I suppose most people were well known because, as I said, it was such a small place,
Everyone knew each other.
Yes, it was even like that when my mother was growing up here, after the First World War. But I think we had a lot to be proud of with the example they set, with the, although most of them didn't realise what they were getting into, they thought it was going to be a great adventure to go over there, and they thought it'd be over in a few months and they'd see the world, but it was very much different to what they thought. I can remember a great uncle of mine. I was quite a small child, and he used to talk about it. He put his age up and went. His older brother had enlisted, so he was 18, so this uncle was only 16. So he thought, well, he wanted to go and join in this skirmish as well. So he put his age up and went. But he said when they got there, they realised the error of their ways, and he said they were just so frightened, because some of them were only 14 and had put their age up as well too.
Sounds like quite a common thing, to put your age up so you could go over there.
Yeah, but he was just so frightened, and he said they used to give them a tot of rum to stop them shaking so they could fire at the enemy. And it's really, it must have been a really frightening time for them, when you see films like Gallipoli and you realise just what they faced when they got there. Excuse me. Many of the people who went, they came back and eventually settled down to normal life again, I expect, but and then of course it wasn't too many more years before they were sending their sons off to the Second World War. Unfortunately, we don't have the names of everyone who went to the Second World War, so if there's any listeners that know of anyone from St Mary's that enlisted in the Second World War, I'd be very much like to hear from them.
Well, that's very interesting. Thanks for coming in today, Norma.
That's all right. While I'm here, could I just mention that our society has an historic trip coming up. It's just a morning where we'll be visiting the Glenlee home at Regentville. And it's a beautiful big home out there, and on Saturday the 24th of May we'll be visiting there, and it's just $12. If anyone's interested, they can contact me on 9623 2307, and we'd love to include them in the trip.
Okay. Fantastic. Okay, well, we'll see you back here next month. And stay tuned. You're listening to the local news show on 100.7 WOW FM.